What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit, and today we're going to be recapping Week 11 in the Overwatch League, Week 1 of the Summer Showdown Qualifiers. Got a lot to talk about today. First, I want to thank everybody for joining me. All you guys that have been supporting me over the last however long, thank you very much. If you're new coming in, thanks for stopping by, guys. I do Overwatch League content 2 to 3 times a week, maybe more. Sometimes when there's stuff going on, I will do a couple extra episodes here and there, depending on what's going on. Working on some other things. We'll see what happens. Thank you very much. Please hit a like, hit a subscribe. That would be fantastic. All right, let's dive into it, guys. We had an interesting week in the first week of qualifiers in the Summer Showdown in the Overwatch League this week. So we had some big matches. We highlighted a couple. One of them went exactly the way that I said it was going to go, and the other one went the exact opposite way as I thought it would. So the normal for me. When my confidence gets high, I'm like, yeah, I think I figured this out. Then it gets shattered. You know how that goes. Let's talk about what we had going on this week. And there's some like broader range topics I want to talk about too, as far as standings, teams on the rise, teams that are dipping, teams that are kind of middling, teams we don't know what is going on with, but aren't necessarily in that much trouble. So let's talk about it. All right, we'll go over the scores really quick. We'll just run down Friday. 2 games we had. We had Paris beating London 3-1. Gladiators, like as I said, beat the Shock 3-2. Then Saturday we had Hangzhou 3-0ing the Valiant. The Dynasty winning 3-1 over Chengdu. The Charge with an upset beating the Excelsior 3-2. And then back to NA Saturday, Shock beat London 3-2. The Defiant beat the Mayhem 3-2. Boston beats Vancouver 3-1. Seoul beats Hangzhou 3-0. We also mentioned that really quick. Chengdu 3 over Guangzhou. New York 3-0 over Valiant. Paris with the shocker of the weekend, kind of up in the air with that, and Guangzhou more Paris, but we'll go Paris on that angle. We'll talk about this a little bit later. 3-2 over Gladiators. Boston shellacks the Mayhem 3-0, and Toronto finishes the weekend off with a 3-0 over Vancouver. All right, so Friday we had, the first match, highlighted match. Gladiators take care of San Francisco, and there's a lot of narratives, a lot of things that came out of this that a lot of people want to sway one way or the other with it. And I'm kind of like in the middle on that. I don't think the Shock necessarily look bad. I just think the Gladiators look better. They look different. They don't look bad. Now, the fact that you have Glister playing Tracer instead of the best Tracer in the history of the Overwatch League, you will not win the fight, so don't even bother. Do not say Prophet. Don't say Doha or Decay. Nope. It's Striker. Sabiobi. Whoever you want to say. You ain't going to win the argument with me. It's Striker, period. Anyway, without Striker and you have Glister on Tracer, it's not as good. And then you compound the fact you bring in Ons, who's a little rusty in the server as far as with pros and stuff like that. Yeah, sure, he's playing ranked and whatnot. But when you're on that level, playing against guys that are on the same level as you is a little different. And getting back into the swinging thing with the team. But the Gladiators look good in this match. I'm not taking anything away from them and saying that San Francisco was a tick less and they should have lost. The Gladiators were on their game. They looked really, really good. Their tank line looked fantastic. Mirror and Space were playing. Space was playing out of his mind. And I don't think Space wanted to lose the Shock again, is kind of what it boiled down to for a bit. It felt like Birdring was doing Birdring things, and Kevster was playing really, really well too, and their support line was playing good. All of the things that we talked about that they needed to do, they did. They neutralized certain aspects of the Shock, mainly their tank line. They kind of kept them in check the whole match, and it kind of came to fruition. I thought Kevster and Birdring and or Mirror, I said Mirror earlier, I meant Muse. The DPS guys for the Gladiators were just better in this match, and so were their supports. It came down to certain points in this game where, you could say the Shock lost it on certain maps or the Gladiators won it. You could spin it either way. It wasn't every other map kind of scenario we had going on here where the biggest problem the Shock have had all year long, and I think I don't know if it's how they're playing these maps or compositionally how they're going in, whether whether or not they're going in the right way, but they lost both control maps, and that is, it feels like if you're playing the Shock, and London proved this later on in the week too, you can beat them on control. If you beat them on control, you have a good shot of going through, and if you get to map 5, if you can survive what the Shock do, they're still a good team. I'm not saying they're a bad team, and I don't think if anyone is saying they're a bad team, they're out of their freaking mind. They're just not as good as they were last year, and everybody else is better. So the biggest problem that they have right now is these control maps. Now, they came back, and when we were talking about London there, they won map 5, which didn't surprise me. But when you're playing a caliber team, when they play these teams like the Gladiators, Dallas, Houston, some of these teams where you get into these map 5s, they're going to lose. Because those teams are better than London are at certain things. And I think London's improving slightly. But the biggest map that really where the Gladiators actually could have taken control earlier was that Kings Row map where they lost 4-3. It's hard to beat San Francisco on Kings Row. So the fact that they came that close proved to me that they were in this match for the long haul. And just the play of Space in this match was phenomenal. He was all over the place. He was doing great. Top-level competitor. And he was taking control of the map. And they were they were also harassing the tank line and the back line a lot. They kind of almost let Glister do what he does. And, they were peeling and such for him. But the dives and stuff like that the Gladiators wanted to do, they were able to do it against the Shock. And the Shock, a great team, so they were able to withstand some of that, counter it, and come through and win these maps in the middle. But eventually, as we saw at the end of the match, the Gladiators just beat them. They were at this point, they were the better team in this match. I don't think San Francisco is quite adjusted to having to play around Glister and with Glister and Nero, or when they put in Ons yet. I don't think it's going to take them long. Everyone wants to say that this is, a big problem. The biggest problem I see is that Striker is a god, and when you lose a guy like that in any sport, look at the Bulls. They still made the playoffs when MJ was old and retired and then went off to the Wizards or whatever the hell he did. The Yankees still made it. Well, what I was trying to say, the Yankees, after Jeter left, and guys of that caliber, you still have guys that are decent and above average. It's not the same because there are certain aspects that these guys bring, and Stryker brought those. He was a fierce competitor, and just his will and desire to win was above everything. Was why he clutched out these matches. And when you lose that, you lose something. Now, was he as good as this year as he was in the past? I think he was feeling a little bit of stress, but he still clutched out a lot of fights in these matches that they won for them to win, and he wasn't there. So they have to develop a different play style. Someone else has to step up and take over the role. Everyone wants it to be Violet or someone like that. Violet, if you saw it at the end of the London match, he was pissed that match went 3-2. They need some of that. They need some of that emotion and to get them straight. Because there are times when it feels like they just go in and certain guys on this team think we're the Shock, motherfucker. Here we are. We're going to win this game anyway, regardless. But I think they need a change in attitude and maybe a little bit of a change in style of play. Dial back the aggression a little bit and maybe be a little bit more reactive instead of trying to be as proactive. Because when you don't have a guy like Stryker that's going to take out the back line in 2 clips a lot of the time, or make a big play on Reaper, or just do a key teleport taking care of business, whatever the stuff that he was bringing, you have to be able to figure out how to work your game. And they haven't gotten there yet. And they will. And they're still good. They're still in second place at the end of the week. So as much as we want to say the Shock are done, the Shock just are better, slightly better than other teams, and they haven't figured out the playoffs yet. And without Stryker, I don't think they're as good. But, here we are. So the Gladiators take this match for them. Now, there was some other stuff that was going on this week. Now, a couple of things I wanted to talk about before we talk about the next match. We had some weird scenarios go on and things that I thought, like, APAC, as I keep continually saying, is fucked up. There's no other way to put it, guys. I'd like to say, well, there's nuances to the way they play. Nah, that side of the bracket is just, I want to say it's other than Shanghai, I was calling it, you have the Chengdu zone and the Seoul is a box of chocolates. But actually, let's talk about it before we get into that real quick. Seoul is actually evening out as maybe not that unpredictable, weird, don't know what they're doing. Yeah, you might watch the match and go, what the fuck are they doing? But they're winning. And it's not like last year where they were going out and you're going, what the crap is this? Why? And they lose to Guangzhou or something like that. Well, maybe not last year. Maybe they lose to Hangzhou, we'll say, because Hangzhou was bad last year. But they're not doing that this year. They are kind of staying within shouting distance, at least, of the damn dragons. But overall, the dynasty, I mean, they have the same record, but Shanghai's just better in tournaments. Like, if it happened today, if they have 8 points and Shanghai has 11, if Seoul happened to do something and go to a tournament and, maybe get ahead of the Dragons in points or tie them, they have a better map advantage by double. So they're beating the teams they need to beat. Shanghai's some teams are keeping close to Shanghai, and I also think it's playing up to the level of Shanghai because everyone knows they're the benchmark. And, but the rest of the teams, you don't know we haven't seen Philly yet. We saw everybody else. And, New York losing to Guangzhou. I'm going to talk about that for a second. I gave them a pass. Let's talk about this tank line. It's hot garbage. Look, you can make all the excuses you want and all this stuff, but Bianca and Yakpung are just bad. I'm sorry. And Friday's not that great either. It's the DPS and Jonak. Jonak fucking was lit up and took the second match of the week for them. He just went off. I mean, yeah, they were playing the frickin' Valiant, but I just think he took out all of his frustrations on the Valiant in that. But the tank line is holding New York back. And Friday, to a certain extent, not as much. That tank line just drives me nuts. Freaking Yakpung, please don't die first in every fucking fight. That's all I ask. I will mimic that with Florida. For God's sake, Oj, please stop dying. You're feeding. Or they're focusing him. Or both. They're baiting him. I don't know. We'll get to that team in a minute. But yeah, New York, whatever. And then you got Hangzhou. They had the benefit of playing the Valiant first and just, whatever with them. But they look terrible against Seoul. Absolutely terrible. As much as I liked, what was going on with them before in the last stage, and I just thought it was an anomaly that New York beat them, they look bad. Seoul, they could not control what Fitz was doing in that match. Fitz absolutely tore them up. And I said, I remember talking about the match, going, well, Fitz and Prophet are going to do what they do, but it's not going to be enough. Nope, I was wrong. Fitz was going to do everything. And, by the way, Marvell is better than Gesture at this point. Marv won. Marv won. Looked, him and Chuyu looked fantastic. I like that. You guys know I'm critical with the main tank thing. I'm a dick. I expect a lot of my main tanks, especially when I have picks on the line. New York. But anyway, I'm all over the place, guys. I'm sorry. I apologize, but I'm excited. I was going to record on Sunday night. Got up. I had to stop because if I did, it would have been about a 45-minute rant on the fucking mayhem. Who we're going to talk about right now. We talked about APAC. It's weird. It's crazy. Chengdu looked actually pretty good, but Seoul's number 2 now, in my opinion. After watching them beat Chengdu and Hangzhou pretty handily, Marv 1 should be your starting main tank all the time. I just like him and 2U. They have a good synergy, and it gives opportunities for Fitz. My God, he was so on fire in that Hangzhou match. It was just ridiculously good. I mean, as much as I didn't want to lose the pick, it was fun watching that. Now back over to NA. A couple teams that we talked about to shock a little bit in my thoughts on them. We'll talk about the Gladiators in a minute. We're going to talk about their second match of the week, which was the banger and puzzling and crazy, and proved some other points for Paris in that. Mayhem. They are now currently on a 5-game losing streak. They have not had a losing streak like that since 2019, during the GOATS era, when they were god-awful, if you guys remember that team. This team has a better roster than that on paper. I don't know what is going on with this team, other than the fact that it feels like, to me, if Yaki does not make godlike hero plays on Tracer right now, they are terrible. Slime is getting killed either first or second in every fight. I don't know if it's because Oj is getting killed and he's trying to heal him up or something, or, with the engages and disengages with Oj. Oj is also, he has moments where he looks great, but the thing is he's getting clipped or focused or whatever you want to call it, picked off first in a fight a lot, which, say what you will about it, it's a big problem, and it's causing a lot of stuff. BQB does not look as good as he did last year right now. There's a lot of problems on this team. On paper, they look to be a top 6-7 team. They are now right above the London Spitfire, and the only thing that's separating them is their 4 wins. They are 4-6. They are, obviously there's teams that haven't played and stuff like that, but they got absolutely dismantled by the Boston Uprising. That was an ugly match. Boston just ground them down into the dirt. I mean, for the love of God, guys, you can't... I don't want to get into the Torb thing because it's going to make me go absolutely bonkers, but when you're getting picked off 41 times by a Torb turret, yeah, okay, eliminations. If it does a little damage, you're going to get eliminations from it. But the fact of the matter is you're at a professional level and you cannot deal entirely with a Torb turret. Yes, it is annoying, but if you watch other teams, even when Paris was running against the Gladiators, they managed most of the time to neutralize it. But Florida literally went bronze and ran face first into it. For every time, it was comical to watch. I think confidence is also gone from this team too. The confidence and swag that they kind of had at the beginning of the year when they got into the May Melee, once they lost that match in the May Melee, it has gone sour. When they got beat by the Dragons. There's something up with this team that they just need to work on a lot of stuff. I don't like compositionally what they're doing some of the time. They're relying too much on dive when they shouldn't be. Then they're playing rush when they shouldn't be. Then they're trying to play ball. They're bringing in checkmate. I understand it to an extent. BQB is not up to par right now, so you maybe want to try something a little different. Okay, I'll give you that. But it didn't work. Toronto, Boston, who are teams that I thought were worse than them at this point, are better. Toronto had a fantastic weekend, and that's the next team that I want to talk about. Before we dive into that the Gladiators match, we'll talk about the Gladiators a little bit. So Toronto has been looking really good. They look good all weekend long, and the biggest key is Aspire. I think that kid needs a full-time contract. I had talked about it when he played. He came in and played in the June Joust for them. He looked really good, and his Tracer, he was neck and neck with Yaki most of the time. In fact, I think he bettered him a good deal of the time. And Yaki has a little bit more experience in the pro level, so I think he got him. But I think once Aspire gets some playtime a little bit more and gets a little bit more accustomed to it, a little more used to the pace and all the things in the pro level, I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think they found themselves a gem. I had heard things that, about him being decent and stuff like that, but seeing him play, I love what he does. He's shot this team with an unbelievable amount of energy that they needed. I mean, yeah, Toronto beat Vancouver, but they beat Florida 3-2, and it was pretty close most of the time, but when it mattered, Toronto did the things that they needed to do, and a lot of that was key on Aspire. And their support line played good, too. Lastro is underrated, and Ansunjae, it looks pretty good. You know, they're not a bad team. As much as we want to put this narrative out, and, you know, Sato and Michelle are a competent tank line. That, you know, I probably said it, you know, Toronto was disappointing. Yeah, they were in the last stage. They were. They look good against Mayhem and Vancouver. But I'm going to throw this caveat in there. How good is Florida right now? Is beating them 3-2 a feather in your cap, or is that something you should be doing? Because Florida's not playing well. Either way, they got the win. So they're 2-0. And I like, they're looking on the up and up. Another team that's looking good too, real quick, is Boston. Boston is turned out to be a welcome surprise. You know, once again, they beat Vancouver, but, you know, it's Vancouver. And Vancouver didn't look as terrible as they did. But Boston, they laid the wood to the Mayhem. They absolutely mashed them. Like I forget who was doing the interview at the end. They're like, the Mayhem telegraphed what they're doing, so we were just ready for it. Oh, maybe it was Valentine. So I just put a torp turret in front of them, and they just fucking stood there and stared at it for fucking 10 minutes and got 3 out. Yeah, Moulding. Sorry. I was trying not to get mad at the torp turret thing. But if you're going to run into it, not my problem. That's the way, you know, I would look at it if Boston. Hey, you're dumb enough to run into this thing? We'll just keep putting it right up in front of you. He was placing the turrets in good spots and stuff like that. But Boston has been looking really good. Punk played really well. I thought they were going to replace him there for a little bit. But, you know, maybe a rotation with him and Gary Busey, is working out. You know, Myeongbong is great, and you know they're playing really well. And Stan 1 was a fucking monster. He absolutely ate the Mayhem alive, which I don't know if that's hard or not anymore. But Stan 1 was great. That whole team played really, really well. I am 37. I told you guys he was a sleeper in this league. I just did not think he got a chance when he was on Toronto to play what he was good at. He got fucking stuck on Zarya and Goats. And that's a death nail for anybody that some people don't want to play that. I know he probably had the tracking and this and that because there were other guys in this league that had to play that and they were terrible. They just didn't want to do it. They want to play shooty shotgun or, you know, play McCree or whatever. His McCree was fantastic, and so were his other heroes. He was great. He lit up the Mayhem, and obviously he took care of business for them against the Titans. So Boston is looking great. I'm looking forward to watching this team more. They're kind of fun to watch. I'm glad they're doing as well as they did. Now let's talk about, after we talked about Boston and a couple other teams, I got my mauling about the Mayhem out of the way. I will remain calm for the remainder of the episode, more or less. I'm starting to talk about a match that's going to make me get a little angry and anxious. But Paris Gladiators. Okay, so going into this match, Paris looks decent, and I thought they were kind of on the up and up. I like the guys that they added recently with Dredro and Festola. They looked fantastic against London. London looked better. I think Sparker's going to help them when we get down the line. I think they'll eventually win before Vancouver does. But Paris looked really good in that match, and then going into this match, it started off the Gladiators just carried on what they were doing against San Francisco. But then on Route 66, Paris kind of figured them out. Now, Paris was, like, I believe Uber had said a couple of times in the beginning is that he was kind of playing mystery heroes. He was trying to figure out what to do when the answer was Tracer. The answer was Tracer, and he should have just started doing that. And the Gladiators, and I'm not making excuses for the Gladiators here, so don't take it that way. The Gladiators should have won that 3-0. They were going into a final fight on Route 66 to win the map and win the match with Rally, an EMP, and I believe they had one more key ultimate in that, and they blew all 3 of them. Now, a lot of people are going to say in this about this, and I've seen it online, and I've seen people saying this, railing Deepay. Look, I'm going to say this right now. DPay did not fuck that execution up. That was on the Gladiators players. You can say certain things, subbing in and out people, this and that, but Paris countered them, and once Paris started countering them, they had trouble. Then they started yeeting ultimates, thinking they were going to just walk over them, and Paris had none of it. They were making key plays, and a lot of it was Onigod playing Tracer, just taking out the back line. I mean, he took out Shu like 19 times, it felt like. And there were just some plays on that map that the Gladiators were missed opportunities that you cannot blame on coaching. That's on the players playing the game. Space spent the majority of the third point of that map out of his mech. They were focusing on him, and they were focusing on Shu. And I know that decided at a certain point, these are the two guys that are giving us the biggest problem. Yeah, Birdring is going to do what he does. He was playing a decent enough, but he has trouble occasionally with his EMPs. Now, he had a couple of 4-man, 5-man EMPs with no follow-up on that, which also goes back to follow-up. I also will say one thing about the Gladiators. I don't like the Genji on that. They got value. Oh, that was the other ultimate. Yeah, they had a Nano Blade. So they went into the last fight with a Blade, Nano Boost, Rally, and EMP. And they get stopped miles short of the goal. I'm exaggerating, but as far as at the end of Route 66, miles away. They were like at the beginning of the truck. The big thing with the American Eagle, or American flag and eagle, the tractor trailer. That's what I was getting at. They at the front of that, they just ended. And how the fuck does that happen? Now, a lot of it's counterplay from Paris. They came out, they kind of ran a stationary comp, slowed them down, but still, you should still be able to win with those 5 ultimates. Come on, guys. So that was a missed opportunity for the Gladiators. Then on Anubis, they got fucked. And then they, instead of running Skewed and Kevster, they ran Moth and Mirror and started off with Genji and Brig. Now, I thought the whole deal was Skewed was the Brig guy. If you're going to run Brig, run Skewed. I know there was probably a different plan for point B, which they eventually, kind of went into, and then at the beginning of it, Mirror went to Echo. Kevster could play Echo too. But yeah, there was just some things that they started doing. Now that is a DPay problem. That is also a problem of, oh fuck. But the Gladiators, they blew this game. The Paris Eternal took advantage of their mistakes in gameplay. And then eventually took some advantages on into Anubis with personnel. I understand that plan. All right, I'll give them that, but I still that's one I'll peg on DPay. But the big problem really with the Gladiators is not the last 2 maps; it's the one that started the fall. That was the big map, and I also think that mentally fucked them in that whole match. God, I've been doing that all day. The fact that they lost that match, should have won that match on Route 66, and they lost it. Paris took advantage of a lot of things that they were doing. They figured them out, and they took it to them in the last 2 maps. I mean, Anubis and Nepal weren't even close. Paris just rolled them. At least on Nepal, they rolled them pretty good. But still, you can't just blame DPay. You can't say, well, they have the guys, it's DPay's fault. The guys also have to perform. You could say the same thing about the Mayhem. The Mayhem have the guys. You're just going to blame Yaki? No, you're going to say, oh, just feeding. You're going to say, this guy's doing that. They're relying on Yaki too much. Sometimes the Gladiators are doing that too. You can't just blame DPay is what I'm getting at. There were a couple things in here, mistakes, but you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt in this. But Paris, they look fantastic. The 2 new guys that came in at the end of Summer Showdown, June Joust, are proving to be just exactly what this team needed. They look like they are on point to maybe making a run into the knockouts, and I think they could do some damage. Can they beat Dallas? I mean, we haven't seen Dallas yet, but we know what we're going to get at some point. I don't know, but I think they can. They prove they can beat the Gladiators. They could potentially beat the Shock. Maybe Washington, a couple other teams like that could be in this. They're looking pretty good. So yeah, I mean, I gave my piece on the Gladiators. I think I just want to see how this plays out next in their next round of matches, because this one could sting a little bit, because I think they know they let it go too. So we will see what their mental fortitude is like. And this is where DPay comes into play as to, hey, guys, it's going to happen. Move on to next week. You know, you got to have that. Sometimes you got to have that Bill and Checky-in attitude of, we're not talking about Paris. We're talking about the next match. You know, we're moving to Cincinnati. If you guys remember that quote. You got to compartmentalize each match. And he's got to get these guys to do that. I mean, they got a couple of big matches coming up. They're 1-1. They're not terrible. I mean, they got to play Toronto and the Justice. So it's not like they have an easy road. I mean, the same thing you could say for Boston and Paris. Because I believe... But I do think right now, of the teams we've talked about, I think the Mayhem might be done for the year. I think you're going to be lucky if you see them win a couple more games. Unfortunately. I mean, I'm a fan. The way they played, the way they looked when they played, how their attitude while this was going on, they just had this, I don't want to call it despair. They had this look of, fuck, we're bad kind of vibe going on about them. So, yeah, Paris has the shock on July 2nd. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to be an interesting match, and I'm looking forward to watching it just by watching Paris and seeing how they up their game. But yeah, so there's some of my takeaways from the week. Real quick, let's talk about overall standings. We're getting to that point in the year. So overall, we're talking playoffs here. Right now, I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. It's Dallas, San Francisco. Houston hasn't played yet. Gladiators, Toronto. Toronto's in the 5 spot, surprisingly. I know, it surprised me when I looked at it the first time. And then you got the Justice, Boston, Paris, Atlanta, and they're, like I said, Mayhem, 10th. They're tied point-wise with a bunch of teams. And that was they're tied with Toronto, Paris, Atlanta, Boston, Washington right now. But I don't think it doesn't look promising. But yeah, that's the West. The East, we have Shanghai, Seoul. Philly hasn't played yet. Only team in the APAC region not to play. Followed by Hangzhou, Chengdu, New York, Guangzhou, and the Valiant. The cutoff point right now is the Washington Justice. As far as, like I said, they haven't played. Top 6, Dallas, San Francisco, Houston, Los Angeles, Toronto, Washington right now. Boston's close, but map differential goes in favor of Washington right now, who hasn't played yet. East, top 4 teams. Philly hasn't played yet. We got Shanghai, Seoul, Fusion, Spark. Kind of where you maybe transposes Chengdu and the Spark. But they're close. Chengdu's within 1 point of them. So we'll see what happens. But Hangzhou's got 5 maps on them right now. And obviously 1 more win. So, I mean, that's the standings. This week we had a bunch of map 5s too. It was fantastic to watch some good matches again. I'm not going to go on a hero pool thing. Watch the other guys talk about the hero pools and what happens when you take heroes out of metas and what you guys know. You watched the June Joust. You saw what happened. Certain teams get it, certain teams don't, and you get 3-0s all over the joint. With all the heroes available, teams are trying different stuff. We saw a lot of Torb, Symmetra, heroes that we don't normally see, people trying different stuff, and certain things working and certain things not. There's going to be a new meta and all that stuff, so I mean it's kind of shaken down a little bit, but at least we got to see some different stuff, and it just worked out better in the hero pools in my opinion. But it is what it is. But guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks a lot for joining me. All of your support is greatly appreciated. All of you new guys, thanks for stopping by. Please hit a like, hit a subscribe, all the YouTube things. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe, have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.